Yes, that's the one. Thank you. There are two initiatives. One, it comes from Slovenia Association, and the other comes from Apimondia. So you can find them in the websites accordingly. And it is trees for the bees. That's how we call it in Apimondia. So as an association, you can also enter there. And at least the idea of the Apimondia is that associations that they can manage in 1 or 2 years or 3 years to achieve the higher percentage of their goal, and their goal should be planting more than 10 bees per member, then they will have a special award in Apimondia Congress as a recognition for their work. So yeah, you can find this in the Apimondia website. Now, something about the, it was said before, for the tests and the monitoring of the performance of the colonies in order to be able to select your stock for the next year. Well, you know better, but I learn a lot from the breeding associations in your country. I don't want to go into details of who and what, because probably I don't know correct and everything, but I learn a lot about these performance tests, and now we try to incorporate this knowledge into other countries, also into my own country, and everybody gets whatever is suitable for our case, of course, not everything. Huh? So yeah, there are methods over there to monitor your stock. So I will continue from what we talked about the first day. And I realized that in the first day, I gave you a lot of information, and somebody told me that I didn't have a stop, a full stop, or a comma. And I apologize about that. And the idea was to bring you with a lot of information, and in order to continue today and conclude. But I wanted you to have this baseline, let's say, information in the beginning. So today we will continue with the pesticides approvals. What is the role of EFSA, and what are the pitfalls for us in all this struggle against the pesticides? So, yeah. Yes, it's all right. So why? Why we really discuss this, why we really struggle for this, why we spend energy, time, and money on this. I don't know. I'm not doing something I'm not doing correctly. Yeah. So, environmental pollutants, because we started the previous time talking about what we find in pollen and nectar mainly, okay? Environmental pollutants, therefore, and mainly pesticides, are reducing the value and the quality of bee products. And this is something that we don't want, because we are producers, and because our products, as I said, are not only superfoods, because there are superfoods, and that's how we need to promote them, but they are also used as medicines and cosmetics. Therefore, they need to be of a higher quality. Therefore, the residues in these products, they should be as less as possible, even without considering the maximum residue levels that they are under legislation. We should be, if on zero, just above zero. Because also environmental pollutants and mainly pesticides have lethal, okay, and sublethal effects, and this is the most important, because lethal effects we see, we fight, and they are very well accepted from scientific community, also from farmers as well, from producers communities. The sublethal effects are difficult to recognize, difficult to measure, and they are not really accepted, especially from the industry. And because, remember when I talked and I said One Health means the healthy environment, that it is good environment for the healthy bees, and it's also for health humans. Yeah, that's fine. So remember, we've seen a few slides showing residues of pesticides in nectar and in pollen. Okay, and in pollen. It doesn't mean that everything that is used outside in the field or we use inside the colony leaves residues. It depends of the dose, it depends of the chemical, it depends of the time, it depends of the replication, and it depends, of course, where are our bees. Because if our bees are some kilometers away, they will pick up very few. Sometimes, even when they are very close to the field that it might be sprayed, for example, and the wind makes it in the different direction, nothing will come to our bees. So it is just an indication of what we can find. I mentioned something the other day. I mentioned this insignia project that from next year probably you will, maybe already you've seen a call, because I suppose that my colleagues that they are going to be responsible for Germany, they have already asked for volunteers, for citizen scientists, to use 2 of their colonies and have for 1 year bi-weekly collection of some of the samples for participating in this pan-European study. In the pilot study that we had in 2020, we collected 10 series of samples from April to September from 9 countries, and I'm showing you here only a picture of my country. You can see that most of the substances we find, they were very low levels of residues, but the most important was that lots of them were not approved by the EC. So this is what we also need to monitor, because if there is illegal use, that means that maybe also the residues can go up, or why it's illegal use, why they are not approved, maybe because they are more toxic. So these are things that we need to monitor and understand. And that's the conclusion from the previous day when I was talking, and about the residue data, just to finish with the residue data. That all our products might have from negligible up to high levels. And sometimes we really find so high levels that explains also not only the sublethal, but the lethal effects. Pollen, propolis, then wax, and then it's honey, and then it's honeydew, and then it's water. Usually, this is the list from higher to the lower levels of the residues that we find. And it's good, as I said even the previous day, that honey is somewhere lower because we don't have problems with the consumers. In order now to establish the toxicity level of a chemical, it's not only the nectar and the honey that we need to take into account, like the regulations talk about now, but we need to see the rest of the products and, of course, to see other variables. And all of them, they should be considered in the regulations. So what is the situation? The situation now around the regulations, the tests, and the legislation about the homologation of the chemicals in Europe, because I can talk only about Europe. Remember this from the other time, that there is a study that shows that the agrochemicals we use, in fact, we abuse because we use more, and it was saying, for example, that we use 50 times more than we were using before in 1950, for example. And we believe, many of us, we believe that we can reduce them. Doesn't matter that we also talk about and we fight for stopping the pesticides. it's not only pesticide-free strangle, it's also reducing the number and the dosages that we use on the pesticides. So I made you tired the other day, and because I went through most, if not all, something about 15 cases, like here, from the heart, from the respiration, from the hypopharyngeal glands, here to the fat body, cognition, genotoxicity. I went through some of the results to show you that we have tests. We know in science how to measure them. And I made you tired and apologize for this. But that was on purpose. I wanted, first of all, you to have this knowledge to be able to convince yourselves. Because many of us, we are not really convinced that there are sublethal effects and to what levels that they can affect the health of the bees. Second, that we should know that these effects can be measured. Because if they are not measured, we are talking on the air. They can be measured, and there is enough data to start the strangle. Not enough data to convince the politicians yet. So this is one of the things that we talk a little bit later. Anyway, this is all the tests that I talked the other day. Here is the list. So, this is from the Green Deal, in fact. What it says that Europe is pursuing its ambition for a climate-neutral, sustainable future. The European Commission's Green Deal is an important step in this direction and has its heart the protection of the European Union's biodiversity and the resilience of its ecosystem. That's what we want to achieve. We want to keep the biodiversity of all animals, all pollinators, because it's not only honeybees. We are honeybee producers here, but they are not only the honeybees that we are talking about when we are talking about the protection of the bees, but also how we can make and we can continue to have beekeeping resilient. Okay, to keep it alive. Now, this Green Deal says reducing the use and the risk of pesticides and reversing the decline of pollinators, and we should already have starting this, but anyway, it's never too late. And are two of the actions. In fact, there are two actions. It's the farm to fork and the biodiversity strategies that they are narrowing down to particular actions, and much of the science supporting policymakers on these highly complex bodies of work falls within the remit of the European Food Safety Authority. So I come to the point where to see what EFSA is doing as a European organization and how we can collaborate with EFSA, how we can push towards a direction that it is for our benefit. So the European Parliament or Commission took very important decisions. We are not really sure in Apimundi and also in other environmental agencies that there is strong will to achieve these goals. We have some doubts that they want to do it. We just think that they are under a lot of pressure. They decided it, but they will try to, first of all, to delay, because one of these actions is to reduce 50% the pesticides until 2030, and we don't really have so many years ahead. Another action that we are asking is that this is never going to be achieved if there is no transparency, and there is no transparency. There is no regulation to force the member states to announce the number, the quantities, and the names of the pesticides used. They can give it only to particular authorities, but not to the public. but the public, the citizens, the consumers is the stronger force, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. So, let's see how we work with EFSA. I am doing something wrong. Before I go to EFSA, maybe you are aware of this huge scientific group. Now it is an association, we call it COLOS, for colony losses. Within this huge association, there is a working group called APITOX. It is a group that in order to be a member, and this is not really well perceived by our other colleagues, but we insisted on this, in order to be part of this group, because it's a volunteer group of scientists working together, you have to sign a declaration of interest that you don't work for the industry. For the industry, okay? So you don't get money from the private sector. Just to keep our name and our head front clean. But of course, we are public servants. I work for the government, so we need to work somewhere. We cannot just be falling from the sky. And in this group, the leaders are Simon Delso, Noah, and Piotr. And in this group, we work together to to design methodology, to review papers, to review dossiers of chemicals, and to have a kind of a constructive and independence, objectivity on what is happening, but also to represent other organizations in EFSA and OECD that I will talk to you about. This is just, we meet at least once per year, usually in Bologna, and we spend most of the expenses from our own pocket because there is no funding. But this is what we want to do. And I need to help, I have to thank Noah and Piotr because they let me use some of their slides for this presentation. So, pesticides and bees. There are two different concepts around that. First is the exposure. In order to understand what I mean by exposure, because as I said, I'm not an ecotoxicologist, and some of the terminology is very confusing. Exposure is what possibly the bees we will find in the environment. So what is used? This is exposure. And from the other side is the effects, the toxicity. Exposure does not mean always toxicity. If we have effects, then we combine the toxicity, the exposure, with the effects to see what is really happening. And the routes for the bees to be exposed are different. You know them better than me. It's spraying, it's coated on the seeds. It could also go through water, through the soil. It's exudation, and also sometimes it's a cloud in very, very tiny drops. And this is a kind of let's say, diagram that you can see how these pollutants can come from the environment inside the colony to the pollen, to the nectar, then, or it can be deposited on the bees themselves. Remember, I told about guttation. We have also the plant uptake. Maybe the plant, it takes it from the soil, from previous uses, or from the water source, because the water can bring things from where it's applied to the river, and the river, it takes it even farther away. There is also volatilization as well. There is also dust. And if I remember well, many years ago in Rhine Valley, there was a lot of problems from the dust before even the flowers start flowering. Why? Because the seeds were not coated correctly, and where they were mowed into the soil, then this dust created a lot of problems, and thousands of colonies were dead. I go all the way around. So, Regulatory history in the past, which is not so different from today. Let me see. I cannot see that. Let me see here. So usually, we want to have a national authorization for a chemical that we use. And when we have national authorizations, it's not on the active substance. It's not, for example, on the substance called imidacloprid, one of the neonicotinoids, or deltamethrin. It is usually on formulations. This is the product that's called Fani, and it's in the market. So that's where you find the authorization. Still, first, it needs to have a European authorization as a substance. And this is more difficult. And there are different directives to regulate this. And one of these is that one from 2009, that we need to collect this data and apply, of course, the uniform principles, as they say, for all animals in order to have the authorization. Okay, we started in 1993 to 94 with all this, and now later on the new regulations came till 2014. And 2013-2014 was very important because, okay, I'll tell you later. Now, what this regulation says that we still use in the present, that these are the conditions from approval. They shouldn't be any unacceptable effects on plants or the plant products on the bees or pollinators. But how the industry and we, the producers or the environmentalists, how we translate this? How do you understand this? What is unacceptable? For me, unacceptable could be 0% loss. For somebody, could be 30% loss. It depends the way I see it and where is my profit, my benefit, for whom I'm working for. If I'm a company and I want to bring a chemical into the market, of course it's for my benefit to have this level as high as possible. If I'm a producer, I want to bring it as down as possible. But of course, there is also reality. Reality says, that is, I mentioned this before the previous day. Reality means there is background mortality. What does that mean? That bees die naturally. Of course they die naturally. So we cannot ask for 0% acceptable level because it couldn't be practical. Are you with me till now? Okay. So we go a little bit above. And it was, of course, there are other principles, no causing suffering to vertebrates, no acceptable influence on the environment, fates, non-target organisms, biodiversity, ecosystems. But the regulations were not really very clear on that. And then it came EFSA in 2013 with the first guidance document. And in this guidance document, I was not in the bee business at that time. I was working, but I was not interested on pesticides. It was the time that I started. Some of the scientists from EFSA and also other experts sit down together, and ecotoxicologists and also pollution and environmental scientists. They work together and they figure out that if, for example, in the first few days of the bee's life, after the exposure of a chemical, there is more than 7% of loss in population. So if we lose 7% of the foraging, in fact, population, then this is not acceptable. 7%. The scientists, the beekeepers, the beekeeping associations were quite happy with this because, okay, we can accept it. Even 10% sometimes we can accept it. But it was 7, and it was good for us. And then scientists and EFSA tried to push this to the European Union. Yeah, that's the guidance document in 2013. And so what is unacceptable? And we not to regulate, but we focus on these SPGs. What is SPGs? That sometimes we don't really understand. It's specific protection goals. That means, for example, survival of the bees. It's one particular, it's a specific protection goal. If we had, for example, we could have as a protection goal the viability of the sperm. It could be a particular protection goal. For every specific protection goal, it should be a kind of a test to determine it, acceptable test to determine it, but also a level. Because if you don't have the level, the threshold, then there is nothing. You can just talk about in the air. And the specific protection goals determine, in general, why something needs to be protected, because it explains the concept. What needs to be protected? It is the bees, it is the environment, it is the food, it's the colonies, it's the population, it's the number of colonies. What? If we are talking about other kind of bees, what really, it's difficult to understand. What do we need to protect, the population or the number of nests? If we have solitary bees, what do we have to protect? When and how and for how long, this has to be monitored. Because these are particular and very detailed information that it needs to be in the legislation. Otherwise, of course, nothing is happening. And where? In which part? Everywhere. Which part of Europe? Around the world? Where? Of course, EFSA is working, and the European Union for Europe. So, yeah, remember, the protection goal for the honeybees, for the population, of the foraging population was accepted, was just less than 7%. Now, in general, to understand what EFSA does, because we hear about it well. If my husband was in the audience, he would, in fact, not agree with me, because EFSA is a European organization to protect the policy of Europe. Does not necessarily mean that EFSA has created to protect the farmers and the producers. That's what my husband would say. Me as a scientist, I would say, I want to be positive. And as a citizen, I demand from European Union to form a body where we can all collaborate and we can give pressure in order somebody to think about our benefits. Okay? So I have this positive idea about the work of EFSA. And since I started working with EFSA and be representative of Epimondia in EFSA, I see lots of things there, but I have no problem to collaborate with them. I think there is a very good ground for us to push. So, provides independent scientific advice on food-related risks, because there are different groups working there, that they are submitted their CVs, and then there is the group for pesticides, there's the group for food, there's the group for additives, there's the group for bees, there's the group for, usually for animals or substances that they are related with the food, for the consumer. So there are many of these panels, scientific panels. It's really very difficult to get in a scientific panel in EFSA. The competition is very strong. It's the best scientists there. Second, apart from the panels, there are also the working groups. Some people of the panel, that they also work for EFSA, because it's a very big organization, they form groups, and in these groups, they have a specific target for the next years, and then they invite also stakeholders that they come from industry, from producers, from scientific associations. Epimondia now, for example, is EPBA also, I think, part of it. Copacogeca is a part of it, and other environmental organizations. And all together, they work on a particular subject. And so the goal is to protect the consumers from the risks in the food chain. They gather scientific data, expertise, and sometimes they also finance particular small projects, and I can tell you about 3 for the time being. One is the bee hub for collection of the data that BeeLife has taken the responsibility, collection and monitoring data for bees around Europe. The second is the APIS-RAM model. We are building a model, and I'm part of the team, the scientific team in this case. We are building a model in order to facilitate the field studies for the chemicals, for the homologation, because the companies say, well, if you want a 7%, in order to detect 7% difference between my control and my contaminated field when I'm running the experiments, I need to, I mean, it's a calculation for the power of the test, statistical power. I need to use maybe, I don't know, 5 fields, 30 colonies, 50 colonies. It's too much for me. It's very expensive, and I cannot do it. That's why they push. And we say, okay, let's find a way to collect the data, to make a model, and now we are in the process of calibrating the model in order to facilitate the field studies, to be able to have particular results. Right, okay, so sometimes we have independent knowledge there, and then it's advised. So who's benefit? It's the European consumers. It's fact, it is us. So let's say that we work with EFSA, and as I said, EFSA had already published, how I'm going with time? With time, I'm okay? All right, so 10 minutes left, only? Oh. Okay, so now, this is how in 2013, when there was the ban of neonicotinoids, the country members voted. After 3 publications of EFSA about each one of these 3 neonicotinoids, there was a pressure, and then we banned these neonicotinoids. Finally, it was just a small majority. But this guidance document that it was explaining what to do was never approved by the member states. Because every year, there was a discussion in the parliament, was never approved. And finally, after a lot of pressure, we came in 2020, in fact, where EFSA reviewed the whole thing, included many things, and the proposal was that the acceptable level for the honeybees, that was the guidance document only for the honeybees, that the acceptable level could be from 10 to 23%. My country voted for 23%. I think Germany was in better condition. But finally, because there were some countries very strong, I think usually it's Austria and France, but maybe I'm wrong. Finally, the level accepted, now it's 10%. And it seems that we are going into a condition when this is going to be approved. But there was a very big problem in this guidance. Bumblebees and solitary bees, they are never, I mean, they are mentioned, but then they are left like that. And now, we had just finished a consultation with the scientists, beekeepers, whatever, in EFSA, about the guidance document that it will include also the solitary bees and the bumblebees. And the problem there is that there is no fixed threshold. If, for example, a company who's doing the experiments say, well, in this experiment, for this sulfloxaflor, for example, I found the 20% difference, so I have loss, damage, effects, 20%, but because of this and this and this and this, I accept 20%. And I go and I say, well, but I ran the same experiment in the south, and I found 35%, and I accept 35%. And Jürgen is coming, and he says, as, I don't know, an independent maybe, a risk assessor, and he says, but I found 10%, and for me, 10% is the acceptable. So how we are going to translate it? who's going to give the final decision? This is what we are fighting in this guidance. It's a guidance document of 69 pages. I could not really find the time to go through, and has 19 annexes of another 500 pages in total. And EFSA produced this. It's very detailed. It's huge work. But they have 10 scientists paid only to do this work. And the rest of us, we are doing it on a voluntary basis. But still, we are fighting for this, and we have particular points that we already communicated with them. Maybe we will find time later on. So, okay, that's the idea. A chemical goes to the market. Before a chemical goes to the market, it needs to be tested. The company has risk assessors. They do the experiments. They it is evaluated if it's an active substance. Okay, now it works more. If it's an active substance or a formulation, and then if it's approved or not, okay, there is a decision and so on. So these are regulations to bring something in the market. Then there are official communications from the bodies that they do that, like EFSA, and then we go somewhere else. We go to methodological guidelines. And this is where I'd like to pay a little bit of attention. The legal framework of pesticides, what is in every country or in the European Union. And the regulation that I was telling you before, because also describes that even if there is a chemical which is approved, it has to be followed. The toxicity or any adverse effects, they have to be followed. And this is not really done in all the countries. They only collect sometimes residue data. It's not enough. It's not enough. And we fight also for this. So what and how is in this legal framework of all? Now, when I'm talking about test guidelines and guidance, guidelines, I'm always confused. Guidelines are the documents that they show that something is approved. So you have an approved framework to do something. And there are 6 guidelines like that in an organization who is called OECD. OECD is the organization about the economic benefit, whatever, in Europe. I'm not sure I can translate it. It's an economic organization, but still they are interested on other things. So they take the advice from EFSA. They have their own groups. I think I missed this one moment. Sorry about that. Yeah. I mixed up a little bit the slides. I apologize. That is OECD. Okay, that's the organization. What is called exactly? Environment Directorate anyway, whatever. And they have working groups for bees and also working groups on pesticides. So I go back. And nowadays, as I said, we have 6 guidelines. For bumblebees, it's a new one. For bumblebees, also acute contact toxicity. For honeybees, chronic, whatever. 6. So we know what to follow. Still, there are problems with this, and I will explain. And there are some also 3 guidance that it's not completely approved yet, but we are still working on that. So new tests in order to, for the companies that they are doing the risk assessment, the companies that they are doing the experiments for the bigger companies producing the chemicals, they know exactly with what. Because otherwise, if there is no particular approved test, everybody will do it in its own way, okay? So this is the procedure to go from the guideline, from the guidance, you go to the guideline. And the guideline, in order to be able to be approved, it needs a kind of a ring testing between several laboratories that they are scientific risk assessors, also the companies. Bayer, for example, and other companies, they have, and BASF, they have their own laboratories on this. But they have to ring test together with the others. So it is a decision, a collective decision at the end inside these groups. And every member state should have appointed representatives in this kind of groups. Otherwise, who's going to vote? So what can we do to improve the situation? And here I will also talk about the gaps. Hope I will go quite quickly. So let's start from, this is just an example of letters, open letters, letters that we sent from environment, from Polinis, BeLife, Pan-Europe, Apimondia, our federation, Save the Bees and Planet, and so many other, even Bugs, Greenpeace, so many other organizations. Letters, open letters to the parliament, or particular letters for particular subjects to commissioners, to parliament members in our own countries, because you need to address the problem in your own country first, and then also to people, to representatives in the European Parliament. So we try to lobby. That's really very important. We try to lobby. And of course, we collect, as I told you the other day, we collect also information of the toxicity effects in Apimondia, but also there are projects in every country. I know BNet, for example, in Italy. I don't know now, particularly in Germany. The next thing is, we need the associations, the big associations, or environmental groups to have representatives, to be stakeholders in these big groups, because otherwise our voice is not heard. So we need to be representative in EFSA. EFSA, apart from the stakeholder group like ECHA, for example, is another organization, and we discuss the pesticides, the biocides, and other things. They make forums or workshops or conferences, and they ask the stakeholders to be there, to tell their opinion, to present something, it's not exactly voting in this case, but we have a voice, and we discuss with other people, and we might even lower our expectations if we think that we are not correct. And then, oh, sorry. Here, it's EFSA, and here's EFET. EFET is the EFSA equivalent to my own country. So each country has a food safety authority that all the chemicals are going through there, and the veterinary chemicals, they go to another authority. And some groups, kind of independent groups of some universities, they also do, suggest crazy ideas, taxing the pesticides. That was really a crazy idea, but I really like it. So, representation to different groups that they can influence the policy makers. This is what we have to do. In OECD, I go back now, because everything at the end, at least for the tests, as I said, it's really very important, and we have lots of gaps in the regulations because of the tests, and we need to work with OECD. But before we go there, I told you that I will mention some of the gaps in this guidance, for honeybees or for other bees. For example, we need more research, unfortunately, and money, because we need data. Many of the tests that I showed you since last time in the beginning for the sublethal effects, they are not accepted to be ring-tested by OECD, because the initial data, it's not enough to convince them that it is a good way to monitor the health of the bees. So we need more data on specific subjects to get the protection goals. We need new tests. We need to invent new tests. Some of the ones that I showed you, they can be some of these new tests. We need to set protection goals for the other bees, particular levels, as I said, and not only the population level, but we need to go into reproduction. Nobody talks about the viability of the sperm. Nobody talks about the requeening of the queens. Nobody talks about anything. All the tests last for a couple of months if they are in the field, and a couple of days if they are in the laboratory. And we need also to revise the existing aseptic tests, because this, I mentioned this chronic test. Chronic test means I feed the bees in the laboratory for 10 days. Yes, but we have shown that the low toxicity pesticides, they show, like the fungicides, they show toxicity up to the 25th day. So if we don't prolong the days, in 10 days, it's only the high toxicity tests that you find, you see the effects. Also, I mentioned yesterday, if you don't feed pollen to your bees, you don't see the same effects. Bees, when they go out, they collect pollen, they collect nectar. And because pesticides are more in the pollen, in this chronic toxicity test, there is no pollen. So first of all, you cannot adopt the hypopharyngeal glands test because they cannot develop. They are not developed. I mean, it's so small that you don't really be able to measure them. Therefore, we need to revise this test, and we push for adding pollen to these tests. The industry does not like it. We will see what will happen, and for longer exposure. Pitfalls. I'm finishing. I will not take you that much. Well, pitfalls, gaps, I'm not so sure exactly what is here. Let's say, if we don't have data, enough hard data, to be based, then we don't have any consideration, or the authorities don't take consideration for a variable. As I said, the reproduction, for example. If we don't have country representatives in the groups that they take decisions, like the OECD, we don't vote. When I was interested about that, I asked my authorities, and I said, well, I suggest myself, because there is nobody else in Greece doing toxicology, unfortunately, I suggest myself to be representative of the country so I can go to the meetings. They said, yes, yes, sure, because we don't have anybody, and usually we do need advice. Well, they never pay my expenses to go, and they just send me the documents 1 or 2 days before. Well, it's not really enough time. They are not really very good on this. Anyway, we need to have close relationships with the people that they take decisions in our parliament. And people that they vote in the parliament, they are the politicians, and the politicians, they have advisors, and the advisors are not really aware of the problems with the bees and exactly what's happening in the environment. Because I talked to some of these people even if I didn't know. Sometimes they pick up the phone, sometimes never. Most of the people that we fight for this, we have a special job to do, our research work or whatever, and we don't have the time to work on environmental issues, at least in some of the countries, not in Greece, for example. My work is different, and I'm doing the whole thing, all of this, in my, let's say, free time, because I want to fight together with you, because my father was a beekeeper, or because, I don't know, I'm a little bit disturbed. That means that we need people, ecotoxicologists, that they are paid to do this job in organizations or in countries. And together with these people, we need lawyers. What happened with Valerie, it happened in other cases as well. And I know of people because I was asked to support their case in the courts, and they lost their job, they lost their fortune because they had to pay so much money in the courts, and we don't have lawyers to back up our positions. We need this. We need paid people. Unfortunately, money can help in this situation. Now, also, whatever it happens with these lawsuits, it has to go public. If it doesn't go public, you don't have the support of the customers. And if you don't have the support of your customers, you will never be able to achieve what you want. And we need to be more active in all campaigns.
There are different types of campaign, from going in front of the parliament with posters and shouting, dressed up like a bees or whatever, of like the farmers are doing, they throw the milk or the fruits on the road. This is one type of a campaign. Some we like, some we don't like. Signatures we collect. We have also these consultations. Every document has to go through consultation. It's very difficult to go in the website and find the particular document to write your opinion because you don't really know exactly which point. But other people can help us on this. And then, if we don't have this particular test for the sublethal test, we will have more and more chemicals that they are in, and biocides as well, because there is also a problem there in the market. I had another point for this is Save Bees and Farmers. Save Bees, the farmers I mentioned last time, is an initiative that started a couple of years ago, and in order for the EC to take this seriously and listen, they need to collect more than 1 million signatures. Finally, after 2 years and after a struggle, because some of the signatures that they were on the paper, they were not accepted, we finally had 1,100,000. But that is not enough. Any citizens' initiative, in order to be taken into account seriously, it needs to have more than 1 million signatures. But also, there is another but, that these signatures are collected from all the countries. But 7 of the countries, they need to exceed, to reach a particular threshold. So if we had 2 million, but none of the countries was above, I don't remember what is the threshold, we wouldn't get it. And we were lucky. And I think Germany, and bravo, and well done, you were one of the countries to achieve the threshold for your country. My country, no. So congratulations on this. And because I love the bees, because I think there is a way to live together with the farmers and the beekeepers, with the others as well. There is a way to collaborate to find this golden moment or level where they can protect their stock, their plants. We can protect our livestock, but there is no problem to this. There is no bad interactions, and we can always offer what we should offer, pollination services. They need us, as long as we need them. So we need to go together. That's why Save the Bees and the Farmers is a very good initiative. And because we also need to use and be healthy with our products, thank you for your attention. And I apologize again if I make you tired. So now I need this. Okay. The moderator is not here, so let's take the stage. He's coming. Any questions? I don't know if I will be able to answer if there's something very particular in ecotoxicology, but if you ask me, I will try to answer. And if I will not be able to answer, I can direct you to where you can find your answers. But we need to find, because this is a struggle that is endless. We need also to be practical. I agree. Okay, we need to be practical. That's why I usually talk about veterinary medicines as well. Some of the chemicals that we use inside the colony, they are really very bad for the bees in the long term. And we need to fight. We fight for pesticides, but associations and scientists, we don't fight only for pesticides. And I put it down here because I forget. We also fight for the adulteration of honey. It's the same way that usually we go against the adulteration of honey with the associations together. And also for facilitation of the authorization of the organic acids. This is another problem that we need to work more together.
Geht's? Jetzt geht's. Da ist ja die Kampagne Save Bees and Farmers, wo wir Gott sei Dank jetzt über 1 Million Unterschriften gemeinsam bekommen haben. Und es gibt ja, sagen wir so, nur eine Selektion deutscher Imkerverbände, die sich daran beteiligt haben. Euphemistisch ausgedrückt. Erklär doch mal den Imkern, was das Ziel dieser Unterschriftenkampagne war. Weil du warst ja daran beteiligt. Manchmal wundert man sich schon.
You mean the bees and the farmers?
Yeah.
But what I mentioned before.
What's the target?
The target is to be able first to collect the signatures in order to be heard, but to be able to work together with the farmers to reduce the number of pesticides that they're used, to work together with them for the authorization. I mean, everything what I talked together, it's in this campaign.
Yeah,
Because if we don't have the farmers with our side and we have the farmers against us, we will never be able to gain what we want.
Ja,
We
aber
have to be together.
meine Frage ist, warum ist es uns denn nicht gelungen, der Mehrheit der Imker in Deutschland plausibel zu machen, dass das eine Aktion von und für uns ist?
Well, this I cannot know. What we did was each one of us that we knew that there is this campaign, we tried to publish it in media, in beekeeping journals. But you see, it's very difficult finally for the beekeepers, it seems, to go and open a computer, to spend time on this and try and see what I have to click, 1, 2, 3. Take part on the survey, which is even more difficult. We try to do things on our mobile. That's not so easy. If we want to do everything on our mobile, because we are very busy, and I can fully understand, and maybe did not reach people, or people are not really interested in this kind of surveys because they think that they are top down. They are more interested to support campaigns and initiatives that they are bottom up. Maybe we should start it from the associations then, and not from the environmental organizations.
Ich gehe jetzt ein Risiko ein. Gell? Ich habe 5-mal das in meinem Newsletter propagiert und darum gebeten, zu unterschreiben. Wer von euch hat unterschrieben? Kriegt er jetzt Applaus von mir.
So, congratulations.
So these beekeeper participated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I may judge, I see so many people here. It's the first time in my life that I see people that they come the first day and they have not gone yet. Okay? And you are here from the morning until the evening. I told you that before, so it's good. That means that you are interested to know, even to just increase a little bit your knowledge, because maybe you were here last year, maybe you didn't hear so many new things, maybe yes. I mean, experience from running was, I'm sure it was so good for everybody, but that means that you are really interested, okay? So you spend your time. So that's
Also
good.
es gibt auch positive Botschaften, gell? Und die Übersetzer haben das vorhin ein bisschen euphemistisch übersetzt, als du gesagt hast, ihr habt da alles from your own pocket zu bezahlen, wurde übersetzt
About
vom
what?
eigenen Projekt, aus der eigenen Tasche. Heißt, du musst alle Aktionen, Reisen zur EFSA nach Parma selbst bezahlen und bekommst dafür keine Unterstützung. Gell? Und das möchten wir bei der Gelegenheit doch auch mal würdigen. Ja?
But no, I mean, many scientists were doing this. I mean, and not only scientists.
Ja,
I mean,
aber das
okay,
macht's
we
nicht
are doing
besser.
our job.
Das macht es nicht besser, aber wir müssen ja den Gesamtprozess verstehen. Dadurch verhindert man ja, dass eine breite Bandbreite von Wissenschaftlern und von NGOs teilnehmen kann. Und das ist ja eine Methode, um Öffentlichkeit zu verhindern.
Yes, but also something else. People are afraid. Remember, I mentioned something yesterday on our discussion. Some of the scientists are afraid to put their name under a working group, not like Apitox, but there is a working group in Apimondia. And some of my very good colleagues and friends, they said, well, Fani, maybe I should not put my name under this, because everybody will know that I'm working to support the beekeepers. This is a kind of a conflict of interest if you want to work with EFSA. They stopped me as an expert from EFSA because I was part of Abimondia. I'm not getting paid from Abimondia. Since 2014, even for the group. But it was a conflict for interest for some people in EFSA. Because I support the beekeepers. Well, you have to take some decisions in your life. Okay? And it's not the expenses. It's like, let's say that I went to meet my friends. So I meet my friends, I pay for my ticket. It cost me more on time because I don't have the luxury of time. Me and others, we are very busy. We need people to have the knowledge on ecotoxicology, to work particularly on this. That's the point.
Also ich darf dir mitteilen, dass der neue Imkerbund 2 € pro Mitglied an die Abimondia weiterleiten wird. Und wenn der Deutsche Imkerbund sich auflöst und bei uns beitritt, dann haben wir ja 135.000 Mitglieder, sind dann 270.000 € im Jahr. Fani, du hast so viel für uns Imker getan. Du bekommst jetzt natürlich auch eine Auszeichnung von uns, obwohl du das erste Mal hier sprichst. Ich weiß, wie intensiv deine Arbeit für uns Imkerinnen und Imker ist. Und deswegen bekommst du jetzt auch die Ehrenurkunde Ehrenschulmeisterin der Armbruster Imkerschule. Und das
I'm honored. Thank you.
Und das große Privileg einer Ehrenschulmeisterin ist, dass sie hier Vorträge ohne Honorar halten darf. So, macht doch mal eure Fotoapparate daher, gell?
Thank you so much. Come here. We need a picture. Come here, come here. I need a picture.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the first award I ever got.
The first award?
Yeah, I never got.
And it is the
I
best
never
ever.
got any award. The first one that I got, yes, it was the scholarship to go abroad to study after my first degree. It was a kind of award, of course, but yeah, I struggled for 1 year for this.
Und
Well,
ich
thank you
möchte
so
bei
much.
der Gelegenheit
Really
gleich noch
honored.
was anderes verraten. Wir werden gleich Herrn Scheurer kennenlernen, da hat sich der Zug verspätet. Wir werden ein bisschen was im Programm umstellen müssen. Dr. Scheurer hat ja hier vor 4 Jahren vorgetragen. Er ist ja der Pionier der Waldtrachtbeobachtung schlechthin und so weiter. Und wir werden ihn nachher auch ehren. Er will keinen Vortrag mehr halten, aber auf unserem YouTube-Kanal sind seine beiden Vorträge, die er gehalten hat. Der Andi kann die vielleicht, wenn er nachher einen Augenblick Zeit hat, unseren Kanal hier zeigen. Die 2 Vorträge von Scheurer, die sind ganz am Anfang. Die sind schon 4 Jahre alt. Und immer noch wunderbar sehenswert. Und ich werde vorschlagen, dass wir ihn in Chile als Ehrenmitglied der Abimondia sozusagen vorbereiten und wählen. Gell? Und du wirst ihn jetzt kennenlernen und dann wirst du mir sagen, ob es auch eine würdige Person ist, ihn als Ehrenmitglied der Abimondia vorzuschlagen. Gell? Also vielen Dank, Fani. Vielen Dank.
Wait. Look.
Okay.